Hey, good evening. Since sleep escapes you tonight, I'll take you on a journey across time, back to the distant brilliance of the Tang Dynasty. If this story relaxed you in any way, consider liking, sharing, or subscribing to our channel. Let us become a recurring presence in your nights, as familiar as a dream. Now let the lights dim. Let your room slip into gentle darkness. Pull the covers over yourself. Feel their softness enveloping your body. Deep breath. Close your eyes. It's time to slip into a dream, stretching back over 1,000 years. Here we are at the end of the 7th century in the Tang Dynasty, an age later praised as China's golden era. You awaken slowly in your chamber, bathed in the tender glow of morning light. Around you still lingers the faint fragrance of flowers, clinging from yesterday's coming-of-age ceremony. From beyond the window, a bird's song rings clear and delicate, its notes rising and falling like flowing water, only deepening the serenity of the dawn. You pause, dazed for a moment, and your mind drifts back to yesterday, your 16th birthday, your Ji, your hairpin ceremony. It had been a grand occasion, prepared with painstaking devotion by your loving mother, as the daughter of a mid-ranking official's household, a family of proper standing. Your ceremony was not the most lavish under heaven, yet everywhere it revealed uncommon taste and meanings deep with tradition. The great hall had been arranged with quiet elegance. Your mother had chosen for you the most splendid attire, layer upon layer of silken rukin, its flowing sleeves embroidered with entwining lotus blossoms in gold and silver thread, gleaming softly beneath the glow of candlelight. Your dark hair was combed into a dignified bun, and with her own hands, your mother pinned into it a hairpin of red gold, inlaid with kingfisher feathers, shaped into auspicious clouds. When its cool touch pressed against your temple, you felt for the first time the solemn weight of adulthood, the gravity of being a grown woman. Around you, the wives and daughters of other officials laughed and smiled, their voices gentle as they clustered close, praising your grace and bearing. Under their watchful eyes you changed hairpins and robes, bowed in ritual, listened to admonitions, every movement solemn, beautiful, measured, like a painting of court ladies unfolding, stroke by stroke, before their gaze. In that moment, you were the pearl held in your parents' palms. Life felt like a soft ink painting, poetic, tranquil, brushed only with the lightest troubles of a maiden's heart. Perhaps a faint frown over a sleeve's embroidery not being delicate enough, or a sudden blush when a distant cousin's letter carried a line of gentle concern, but the warmth of yesterday's ceremony had scarcely faded when a thunderbolt struck. A sudden imperial decree arrived, crashing into your life like a stone hurled into the still heart of a lake, and in an instant it shattered every image you had ever held of your future. The shrill, precise voice of the eunuch carrying the edict cut through the calm of your household. That square of bright yellow silk was slowly unfurled before you. Each word upon it weighed like iron. You were not asked. You were not invited. You were commanded, chosen without appeal, to enter the imperial palace, to become one among the emperor's harem. A tidal wave of shock and confusion swallowed you whole. Your heart raced wildly, your cheeks flushed with the dizzying intoxication of what others might call favor from heaven. But almost at once, unreality gripped you. Your knees weakened, your eyes turned instinctively toward your parents, and there you saw it. The blood drained from their faces. Their expressions struck you to the core. The sudden flare of impossible family honor, the heavy shadow of unspoken dread, and beneath their forced smiles you glimpsed, just for an instant, a sorrow so deep it pierced your heart. You were swept forward, bewildered, borne upon a tide you could neither resist nor comprehend. You had not yet grasped what those words, entering the palace, would truly mean. You only dimly realized that what you were about to bid farewell to was not only this chamber, its fragrance and its light, but the familiar alleys beyond the window, the old pagoda tree in the courtyard that had kept you company through countless seasons, and the fragile, fleeting freedom you had known until yesterday, limited though it was, yet real and yours. The carriage rumbled on, wheels grinding over the blue-gray cobblestones, carrying you forward, carrying all your anxious thoughts toward the imperial capital. Behind you, the muffled sobs of your mother, your grandmother, your family faded into the distance. You had smiled bravely when you boarded, holding back your tears with all your strength, telling your parents, your grandmother, your younger brothers and sisters not to worry, urging them to take good care of themselves. You had forced that smile because you didn't want your sorrow to deepen their grief. But now that you knew they were far behind, their faces lost to sight, now that you were enclosed in this small four-walled carriage, you could finally say a true farewell to the hometown you had lived in for 16 years, and to the family who had loved you for a lifetime. At last, your tears broke free. They poured down like water through a burst dike, soaking through the handkerchief your mother had embroidered with her own hands. Farewell, my beloved family. You did not know how long you wept, but eventually the rhythm of the wheels, the The steady hooves outside began to change. The monotonous sound of the travel gave way to something else, and by then you had forced yourself to gather your heart once more. You knew what those rising noises meant. You were entering the imperial capital, Chang'an. You couldn't resist. With trembling fingers, you lifted one corner of the carriage curtain, and in that instant, the splendor of Chang'an's prosperity struck you like a living scroll unrolled before your eyes. On the vast avenue of Vermilion Bird Street, endless streams of carts and horses flowed like rivers. Bells jingled upon camels' necks. Caravans from the western regions, laden with treasures from beyond the deserts. At the doors of wine houses, maidens danced, their veils fluttering, golden bells at their waists ringing brightly, drawing cheers from the crowd. Shops lined the streets in dazzling rows, banners swaying, offering the newest silks, delicate vessels of gold and silver, strange spices and fruits from lands you had never heard of. The air thick with mingled scents, the charred fragrance of fresh-baked flatbread, the syrupy sweetness of candied fruits, and faint exotic aromas drifting from distant kingdoms. Scholars in wide sleeves strolled by, debating in lofty tones. Ladies swept past with towering coiffures, gauzy skirts billowing like clouds, their laughter sparkling as they stepped from rouge shops, faces bright as blossoms. It was overwhelming. So much color, so much life. 16 years of youth, so carefully shielded within inner chambers, now flung wide open before this dazzling spectacle. Your heart pounded wildly, and for a moment, the sorrow of leaving home, the fear of the future, all dissolved into this intoxicating firework of human joy. You stared greedily, drinking in every sight, every sound, desperate to carve it into memory. But the carriage did not pause. It pressed on, deeper into the city, and slowly the noise began to ebb, like the sea withdrawing with the tide. The shouts of merchants, the jingle of bells, the laughter faded away. The streets grew broader, quieter. The people's clothes became more formal, their steps more cautious, their faces more solemn. The splendor that had stunned you, the boundless markets, the living brilliance of 10,000 households, slipped away like a veil of silk sliding from your fingers. No matter how you reached, you could no longer hold it. The carriage crossed into the imperial city. Towering palace walls loomed above you, casting cold shadows that cleaved the world in two. Outside was the realm of living color, of mortal joys. Inside, silence, a forbidden land heavy with ancient laws. The crunch of the wheels upon the stones now struck sharply into the air, each sound echoing as if it were knocking directly upon your heart. In that moment you understood the brief glimpse of Chang'an's splendor, like your distant hometown, like the warm smiles of your parents, had all become unreachable past, severed forever by an invisible, unbreakable wall. At last, the carriage halted before a vast palace gate. The vermilion doors creaked open with a deep, ancient groan, like some slumbering beast opening its jaws. You turned back for one last look, one final glimpse of the free sky you had only just tasted and already lost. Then, behind you, the gates shut. Boom! A thunderous crash. It shuddered through the air. It shuddered through your soul. It was more than the closing of a door. It was the ending of one world and the beginning of another. All sound, all color, all warmth of mortal life was cut away. In its place surged a suffocating silence, a weight of invisible rules, a pressure unbroken by centuries. You clenched your sleeves tight, feeling yourself smaller than dust, and you knew, from this moment forth, you had entered the most splendid cage in all the world. Upon entering the palace, you and the other chosen girls were led together to a secluded gate hall. The air here was utterly different. The noise and anticipation that had filled you when leaving home were now replaced by a heavy silence, invisible yet suffocating. A row of elderly eunuchs and senior palace women stood waiting, their faces stern, their gazes swept over you one by one, not like hosts receiving guests, but like inspectors measuring vessels. You were ordered to stand in a line and step forward in turn. A voice instructed you to walk a few paces, to turn, to bow. Their scrutiny spared nothing. The style of your hair, the curve of your brows, the shape of your waist, even the grace of each step were examined in detail. One hand even lifted your chin with a fingertip, tilting your face into the light from the window to judge whether your skin was smooth and free of blemish. They said that if, on the way to the palace, a crow lingered on your carriage roof, or some ominous bird flew across your path from right to left, it was considered a curse. A girl so marked would be rejected at once, no matter her beauty. Here, even fate itself was read in the language of omens. At that moment, you realized with piercing clarity, from the instant you set foot in this place, you were no longer wholly a person. You were a thing, an object waiting to be graded, priced, and recorded. The official histories speak little of this first selection, their details buried in silence. Later scholars could only reconstruct it from scattered notes and bureaucratic records, because this was never considered something glorious enough to preserve. And after this initial screening, you were lodged in a temporary courtyard. Time there stretched unnaturally long, the air thick with unease and speculation. No one knew where their fate would lead. Would you be inscribed into the register, or dismissed and sent back home? And for some families, rejection was not relief, but shame, an indelible mark upon their name. You observed the girls around you with quiet eyes. Some carried themselves with noble bearing, clearly nurtured in wealthy households, their manners tinged with pride. Others shrank timidly into corners, uncertain even of where to place their hands. Polite smiles and gentle words passed between you. But beneath the surface lay constant measuring, careful testing. This was no peaceful gathering of women. It was a battlefield without smoke, a campaign fought before the war itself began. Then came the true trial. You were summoned into a closed, heated chamber where older palace matrons with the sternest eyes drew near to examine you. This was no longer about appearance or demeanor alone. It was about suitability, to serve the Son of Heaven, to bear the bloodline of emperors. The tongue admired fullness and beauty, but only within balance, the body proportioned, the blood strong. Too thin was weakness, too heavy was folly. Their hands traced without gentleness. They noted whether your skin was fine, whether your hair shone dark and thick, whether your teeth aligned, whether your breath carried any hint of foulness. Every detail was recorded, and in that moment, you felt like livestock in a market. Every inch of your body weighed, measured, and priced. Your dignity dissolved into nothing, and this was only the examination of the body. Meanwhile, your family's background was being scrutinized in secret. The Ministry of Personnel had already submitted records of your lineage 3 generations back. If any relative had been a criminal, died of untimely illness, if any distant kin bore a tainted rumor, it could erase you from the list. As for a woman's virtue, that lofty word rested on mere impressions, whispers, glances. Were you quiet? Were you obedient? Did you lower your gaze when spoken to? None of it was yours to argue. Sometimes, depending on the emperor's tastes or the needs of the palace, you were made to display talent. A southern song, a few lines of poetry, a dance of soft bending steps. These were not true contests of art, but tests of whether you might please the emperor, whether you could serve as an ornament at his banquet, never faltering, never embarrassing. In this, the whispers of eunuchs and female officials weighed heavier than any official measure. They were slaves, yes, but they held the power of recommendation. A single word of favor could secure your place. A single frown could erase you, no matter your beauty. You began to see clearly. In this place, under the shadow of power, personal preference outweighed right or wrong. The official records describe the system of palace selection, a mechanism for the emperor to fill his harem, to ensure heirs, an extension of imperial power into every corner of the realm. But in truth, it was also the most systematic reduction of women into objects, and in the whispers of unofficial tales, stranger beliefs persisted. that the location of a woman's mole foretold fortune or lust, that the shape of an ear, the length of a finger joint, carried hidden destinies. The matrons believed these deeply. Their coarse hands might suddenly pause on your collarbone or at the nape of your neck. A glance exchanged, a whisper shared, and with that, your future was sealed. As for bribes of silver and gold, or please pass through secret hands, these were condemned in principle, but never truly absent. Families always sought to push their daughters closer to power, even by invisible means, yet none of it would ever be recorded in the official histories. At last, the long and burning wait came to an end. That day, before the sky had even begun to lighten, all of you, the girls awaiting selection, were summoned and made to stand in strict rows across the courtyard. The air hung heavy, almost frozen. Only the faint whimper of the morning wind beneath the eaves could be heard, mingled with the quiet, uneven breaths of those around you. Then a high-ranking eunuch appeared, clad in dark official robes. Without expression, he unfurled a roll of imperial yellow silk, and in his thin, sharp, steady voice, began to read aloud the names that would decide each fate. When your name sliced through the silence, your heart shrank suddenly, then began pounding wildly. A shiver, indescribable, shot through your spine. It was not pure joy, but a storm of relief, dread, and bewilderment all at once. You had succeeded. You were chosen. But in the very next instant, a heavier question crashed down upon you. Chosen for what? What, in truth, was waiting for you? Like most young women newly admitted to the harem, your rank was not high. You were granted the title of Karen, a talent. You breathed softly with some relief. At least you were not among those dismissed, sent home in shame, who might stain their family's honor forever. But what did this word, Karen, truly mean? What world, what destiny was hidden behind it? Soon you would know. The harem of Tang was a small universe ruled by the strictest of hierarchies. At the summit, of course, was the Empress herself, mother of the realm, mistress of the 6 palaces, sovereign of all within. Beneath her stood the 4 consort ladies, the celestial consort, highest of them all, standing just beneath the Empress herself, the serene consort, guardian of pure virtue, the rectitude consort, embodiment of moral integrity, and the sagacious consort, keeper of wisdom and talent. These 4 women held rank equal to princes, their power almost royal. Below them stood the 9 concubine ladies, their rank equal to dukes. They bore titles like the concubine of luminous propriety, the concubine of luminous countenance, the concubine of luminous grace, then the concubine of cultivated propriety, the concubine of of cultivated countenance, the concubine of cultivated grace, and at last the concubine of fulfilling propriety, the concubine of fulfilling countenance, and the concubine of fulfilling grace. Only after them came the 27 attendants, among whom you now belonged, 9 attendants of excellent deportment, 9 attendants of beauty, and 9 attendants of talent. This was the 5th rank, and at the very bottom of the pyramid were the 81 handmaids, the precious woods, the palace women, and the gathering women, 27 each. The lowest step of all in this pyramid, clear and merciless, Garen, one of the 9 attendants of Tiao Talent, stood odd in the lower middle. The records state plainly that this hierarchy of the inner court was built to mirror the bureaucracy of the outer court. Every title, every rank had fixed numbers, fixed privileges, fixed stipends. It was meant to transform the emperor's vast harem into a system of orderly rule, draped in Confucian hierarchy. And so, from this day forward, your title became a brand, an invisible seal, dictating every detail of your life. It determined the size and location of your quarters. It dictated how many maids and eunuchs you could command. It fixed the standard of your daily meals, the fabrics you were permitted to wear, the colors you could adorn, whether you might ever touch certain silks, whether you might wear certain dyes. It even determined how many pins, powders, bracelets, or coals you received each month, and whether in summer you were granted precious blocks of ice. The higher the rank, the finer the privilege, the closer one stood to the throne itself. One tongue record notes that a Karen might be allotted a certain number of measures of grain, a few bolts of silk each month. But one step higher, at the rank of attendant of excellent deportment, those numbers nearly doubled. The difference was quiet but relentless, a constant reminder of your place. The emperor's mother, the empress dowager, and the empress herself held absolute authority, especially the empress. She was the true mistress of the harem. To her, you must bow with perfect reverence. At first, your quarters were likely a small, plain courtyard, tucked behind one of the great palace halls, your room narrow, your furnishings bare. You might even share it with 1 or 2 other young women of the same lowly rank. It was there that you understood most clearly. You were but a tiny cog in a vast and merciless machine, a life easily replaced. And beyond the written ranks, there were the silent rules. A low-ranked concubine might be given only stale, bitter tea. In winter, the silver coal allotted was smoky, dirty, staining clothes and curtains, offering little warmth. If you met a higher-ranked consort in the palace corridors, you must lower your head at once and retreat to the side. You must not move again until her entire retinue had passed, sometimes even keeping a fixed number of paces between you. These unspoken rules were often more suffocating than the laws themselves. In theory, once fixed, your rank would not change unless you bore a royal heir or committed a great fault. But in practice, the emperor's whims, the shifting tides of faction, could lift one woman high and sink another without trace. There were always whispers. Some women, though low in title, wielded power beyond measure through favor. Others, though high in rank, faded into silence. Such was the true undercurrent of the harem, the mysteries that scholars would forever debate. Once your rank was named, your life unfolded within that frame. Every day, every hour was bound by ritual. You must rise before dawn, even as a lowly Karen. You must dress according to regulation. Though your jewelry box was nearly empty, though your robes were plain and coarse, still you must present yourself as one befitting the palace. At morning, palace rule required you to offer greetings to the mistress of your courtyard, to those above you, sometimes even to senior female officials or eunuch leaders. It was a process long and weary, bowing, curtsies, careful small talk. If your rank was low, you might be met with mockery or with cold, cutting silence. It was then, most deeply, that you learned, here in this place, dignity was not yours by birth. Face, respect, survival, all came only from your rank and from favor. Life within the deep palace was nothing like the idle, luxurious ease imagined by outsiders, especially for you, a Karen of low rank. Idleness itself was counted as a crime. Very soon, you would be assigned endless trivial tasks. They were called duties, but in truth, they were also silent forms of taming. Perhaps you would spend whole days bent over the embroidery frame, using threads fine as hair to stitch sachets, screen covers, or the hems of the emperor's robes. Perhaps you would be sent to the library or the Buddhist hall, copying sutras or sorting endless volumes of texts, your wrist burning with pain, yet never daring to slacken during festivals or before and after grand sacrifices. You and the other low-ranked women would be made to wash ritual vessels, sort tribute, or fold ceremonial papers, all beneath the sharp eyes of strict female officials. The smallest mistake, a spot, a slip, a stain, might bring scolding. At times, you might be sent to tend a patch of precious flowers in the palace gardens. Your only task, to make sure they bloomed on time and never withered. The labor was dull, repetitive, without joy. It reminded you, again and again, that entering the palace was not to enjoy fortune. It was to become a screw in the vast machine. Even meals carried the weight of rank. The dishes, their number, the fineness of their cooking, when all were strictly set by your status as Karen, you usually ate alone in your narrow chamber, or with one or two others of equal low rank, forced together at a small table. The meals were silent. If anyone spoke, it was only empty courtesies like, "The weather is fine today." No one dared speak truth. You soon learned that even the simplest act of eating was bound by rules. Every bite, every chopstick you lifted was a reminder of your rank. So-called leisure was not freedom. You could never wander light in your family's courtyard. In the palace, guards stood every few steps, eyes watching what paths you could walk, what spaces were forbidden. All was written in law. Your world shrank to the courtyard you lived in, and a few set routes to the service halls, the women's bureau, or the Imperial Garden. Night brought curfew. At dusk, the drum sounded, and one by one, palace gates were locked. None could pass without order. If you were found in the wrong place at the wrong time by guards or eunuchs, punishment was certain. At best, a beating. At worst, suspicion of plotting treason. You lived in a net, invisible, unbreakable, every step bound, every breath watched. To endure this endless time, you might return to the arts you had learned in your maiden's chamber. At night, you might pluck your zither beneath the lamp, hoping faintly the emperor might hear. You might copy poems, paint a scroll, dream that someday your talent would be seen. Perhaps you would whisper with one or two women who seemed kindred, exchanging secret gossip of who had been favored, who had been rewarded. But such friendships were fragile, like castles of sand. The smallest shift of fortune could turn ally into rival. Most of the time, there was only waiting, waiting for favor, waiting for the emperor's notice, as though waiting for rain that might never fall. Every gesture, every glance was bound by the palace code. The inner rules dictated all things: how to walk, how to stand, how to smile, how to answer the shape of your hair, the patterns of your fabric, even the angle at which your eyes should fall. All was fixed, without escape. Some rules bordered on absurd. It was said that low-ranked women must walk with steps so tiny that their skirts hardly moved. To show grace at certain ceremonies, even if you heard something amusing, you must never laugh aloud. At most, you could hide behind a fan and let out the faintest giggle. Anything more was disgrace. Enforcing these rules were the elder matrons, faces hard as stone, eyes sharp as hawks. They moved between the courts, ready to strike at any fault. A glance astray, a smile too wide, could bring a harsh rebuke. Even your breakfast might be the same, month after month. A thin bowl of rice porridge with a few plain vegetables, not because the kitchen failed, but because your rank allowed no more. Each bland mouthful was a daily reminder of who you were. Scholars often wonder, under such strictness, how much of the self survived. Did some women, in secret, late at night, write poems of longing, of sorrow? Did they ever whisper coarse words or make silly faces to a trusted maid just to feel alive? Or did most bury their true selves so deep that only numb obedience remained? How many souls pressed down in silence? How many rebellions without voice were swallowed by these walls? We may never know, only imagine. The years of the deep palace stretched long, and every rise or fall, every honor or disgrace was tied to one single man, the Son of Heaven, the Emperor, to receive favor, to be summoned to his bed. For someone of your low rank was nothing short of an unreachable dream. You might spend years, even decades, within the silent palace walls, and never once glimpse his face. 3,000 beauties in the harem was no empty saying. The emperor's time and strength were limited, yet the women waiting for even a drop of that heavenly rain were beyond counting. How then did the sovereign choose? Most common of all was the system of turning the tablets. After supper each night, eunuchs would kneel before the throne, bearing a lacquered tray. On it, ivory plaques engraved with the names of consorts. The emperor would flip one at random, and that name decided who would share his bed. It was pure gamble, with no pattern, no reason. Sometimes, if the emperor glimpsed a pleasing face at a garden stroll or during a banquet, he might summon her immediately. Sometimes, a clever eunuch, attuned to his moods, would whisper a subtle suggestion. No matter the way, for you, each chance brought dread as much as hope. Every summons carried terror. Every moment might change your life or end it. And then, one day, it happened. The head eunuch arrived in your courtyard, a strange smile on his lips, his high, sharp voice declaring, "By imperial decree, tonight His Majesty summons you." In that instant, your world spun, your hands shook, your heart thundered like a drum. Joy and terror collided, so fierce you nearly fainted. Then began the ritual of preparation. You were led into the perfumed bathing hall. Silent maids disrobed you and bathed your body in steaming waters, laced with rare spices, every inch of skin scrubbed and polished, every limb kneaded with fragrant balm until your body gleamed with scent. It was solemn, yet cold. You felt less a woman and more a tribute, a gift, being packaged for delivery. At last, you were swaddled tightly in a brocade quilt embroidered with dragons and phoenixes. Two young eunuchs lifted you carefully and bore you through the dark corridors toward the emperor's bedchamber. Inside that bundle, all was blackness, only the sound of footsteps and the pounding of your own heart, shame, fear, wonder, confusion, each crashing over you in waves. You knew you were no longer yourself. You were being presented like an offering to the most exalted man under heaven. At the foot of the imperial couch, red candles flickered it, shadows swayed. You were laid gently down, and the quilt was drawn open. For the first time, you were so close to the emperor, you dared not meet his gaze. You remembered every instruction. Bow low, answer softly, conceal every tremor. This was not the warmth of husband and wife. It was a ritual, a performance, where the smallest mistake could snuff out your future or your life. There was little tenderness. What existed was a cold intimacy, born beneath absolute power. By dawn, before the sky had lightened, eunuchs entered silently. You were wrapped once more in brocade and carried back to your courtyard. Palace law allowed no woman to remain in the emperor's chamber past sunrise. And yet, everything had changed. The maids and eunuchs who once ignored you now bowed with smiles, flattering with every word. The low-ranked consorts who shared your yard looked at you with eyes sharp as blades. Envy, jealousy, speculation, and yes, resentment. Overnight, you had become the focus of every gaze, but the glory was fragile as morning dew. The emperor's favor came suddenly and vanished just as swiftly. Even repeated summons could not secure your future, for always there would be someone younger, fairer, newer. The joy of one night soon curdled into the deeper fear. How can I make him remember me? How can I rise? In this garden where thousands of blossoms compete, history shows an imperial summons was the true turning point. It dictated your rank, your stipends, your family's honor or disgrace. Above all, it was the only path to bear a prince and claim security for a lifetime. Every visit was recorded, coldly, precisely, by the Chamber of Attendant Affairs. The purpose was not memory, but management, to track the emperor's schedule, and one day to verify the lineage of heirs. Even intimacy became bureaucracy, even love reduced to record. Later scholars have debated endlessly. Did emperors truly love? Perhaps a few gave genuine feeling, but for most, the harem was not romance. It was an institution, a balance of powers, a stage of politics where favor was strategy and intimacy another tool of rule. And once you first taste imperial favor, once your face or your talents draw the faintest flicker of notice, you have already stepped, without even knowing it, into the smokeless battlefield of the inner palace. Here, no swords clash, no blood sprays in open combat, yet the struggle is just as deadly, and it comes wrapped in silk gowns and spoken through soft laughter, its cruelty and strangeness far beyond what you could imagine. The weapons of this place are whispers. Rumors grow like poisonous vines, a single baseless murmur passed along with care, embroidered and twisted with each retelling, becomes the nail that seals your coffin. One morning you may notice the eyes of your attendants glancing at you strangely, a flicker of pity in their gaze, and only then do you learn that somewhere in the shadows of the palace, people are saying that on a rainy night before you entered the harem, you secretly met a strange man in a garden. They even describe in detail that on your waist lies a birthmark of red cinnabar, a cursed mark said to doom husbands to early death. Such whispers cling like maggots to the bone. No matter how you weep, no matter how you swear your innocence, the seed of doubt is already planted. It will never wash away. And if His Majesty begins to glance your way, at once there will be a voice whispering with concern. Her beauty is striking, yes, but alas, her mother's kin suffer weak hearts. Many die young. Is that not the omen of a beauty destined for early death? So gently spoken, and yet venom beyond gin, beyond cure. Worse still are the traps laid with the strict rules of the palace. Perhaps you have heard why the quiet, devout Lady Zhao, who prayed daily to the Buddha, was suddenly stripped of rank and thrown into the dungeons because someone had brushed a hidden curse in pale rice water upon the first page of the scripture she copied for the Empress Dowager. When the page was turned, a special liquid was applied, and the damning words flared suddenly into sight. Blasphemy against the gods, a capital crime, she pleaded until her throat broke. But that night, she hanged herself in prison. And so you must watch every stitch of embroidery on your robes, lest someone add forbidden patterns. You must weigh every word, lest it be twisted into resentment against the throne. Even the smallest slip may become your death sentence and the ruin of your clan. Another time, in the Eastern Hall, a shy, quiet Lady Wang vanished overnight. Later you learned that when she went to bow before the Empress, someone scattered a few red beans across her path. She stepped upon them, unaware, but in palace law, to tread on grain was an unpardonable insult. Dragged into the courtyard, she was slapped and forced to kneel, humiliated beyond endurance. She fell ill that night and was never seen again. And the most chilling of all are the poisons that strike the body itself. There was Lady Lee, who won a few nights of favor for her skill on the pipa. Soon her fingers swelled and festered until she could no longer play. Only then did the doctors discover that her strings had been brushed with the faintest dusting of poison, which seeped into her fingertips day after day until her gift was destroyed. Or Lady Zhao of Jiangnan, famed for her flawless white skin. After one bath, she broke out in a hideous rash, itched until she tore her flesh bloody, her beauty ruined forever. Later it was found that her soap had been laced with the juice of ground toxic herbs. And if such stories seem like whispers, the records of history bear worse. You recall the fate of Consort Qi of the Han Dynasty, once beloved of the Emperor Gaozu. But when Empress Lu seized power after the death of Emperor Gaozu, Qi was mutilated, hands and feet cut off, eyes gouged, ears deafened, tongue torn away. She was left in a privy, a crawling lump of flesh, called the human pig. Her misery was so unspeakable that even the young emperor, Empress Lu's own son, fell ill in horror after witnessing the mutilation of this once adored consort. In the palaces of Tang, poison was no stranger. Whispers of it drifted through silk-curtained chambers, as common as incense smoke. The most infamous of all was said to come from the feathers of the Jin bird. This legendary creature, recorded in ancient texts, has long puzzled historians. Some believe it was a species now lost to extinction, vanished before modern science could name it. The myths claim it fed only upon venomous serpents and poisonous insects, and that over countless generations, the toxins seeped into its very flesh, saturating its bones and feathers with death itself. Those feathers, once plucked and steeped in wine, the poison clinging to the feather's delicate tip, would dissolve into a draught with no color, no scent, no taste. A single sip, and the victim's life unraveled in silence. Beside the wine, steeped with the venom of the Jin bird, there flowed other, darker draughts of homets, potions brewed in secrecy, meant not to heal, but to erase. Hidden abortions were as common in the palace as whispered rumors. One favored concubine, they say, met her end in horror. She had been given a bowl of medicine, said to soothe the unsettled pangs of early pregnancy. She drank, trusting the hands that served it. But the draught had been switched, by whose hand no one knew. Perhaps by jealous rivals, perhaps by the Empress or the Dowager Empress who despised her lineage, perhaps even by the Emperor himself, unwilling to let the powerful family behind her rise higher by blood. What is known is that her cries pierced the golden walls, echoing like a wounded bird. She shrieked until her voice broke, her blood spreading in waves across the white jade bed. When silence finally fell, only the cold gleam of stone bore witness to her ruin. Beside poison, there was witchcraft, the rise of the famous female emperor Wu Zetian was paved with corpses according to the records that dared to write her truth, as consort Wu, still clawing her way upward, she contended with another favorite, Lady Xiao. It was not long before whispers began to spread. The servants of Lady Xiao were said to have discovered cursed figurines, spell talismans, hidden deep in her chests and closets, charms meant to ensnare the emperor's spirit, charms meant to weaken Wu herself. Whether those tokens were planted or real, history will never say. But in the palace, accusation alone was enough, for no emperor could bear even the thought of witchcraft. To curse the Son of Heaven was to curse the very mandate that bound the empire together. Even the shadow of suspicion was intolerable, and so the emperor, loathing the idea that his precious life and power might be under spellbound threat, decreed a punishment as terrible as the crime was imagined to be. Lady Xiao's limbs were severed, her bleeding body forced into a vast wine jar. There she wailed for days, her cries echoing in the corridors like the groans of some mutilated spirit. Her death, slow, pitiless, and final, was remembered not only as execution, but as warning, and darker yet was the nightmare of the Gu ritual. In the blistering heat of midsummer, the ritual began. 100 venomous creatures, snakes writhing, centipedes crawling, scorpions striking, toads croaking with their swollen throats, lizards darting with lidless eyes, all sealed into a single clay jar. Inside, the darkness seethed, fangs tore into soft bellies, stingers pierced through glistening scales, the air thick with the hiss of venom, and the rasp of chitin grinding against stone. They devoured each other, night after night, until at last only one remained. That lone survivor, bloated with the distilled hatred of its kin, carried within its body all the poisons of the 100. Its venom, milked into powder or steeped into draught, was said to bloat the belly as if pregnant with death, to drive the mind shrieking into madness, to rot the body from within until its victim's screams were the only proof it had ever lived. And when death came, no trace of poison could be found, only eyes glassy with terror, lips frozen in a silent cry. But there was a form even more dreaded, more obscene, the mixing of goo with a woman's own blood of the month, the most taboo and impure of offerings, fused with the powdered husks of the goo insect, and bound to the birth date of an enemy. That cursed mixture, buried beneath her rival's flowering tree, was said to awaken the filthiest of ghosts. It summoned unseen hands to claw beauty from the face, to hollow the womb, to gnaw at the heart and whisper horrors in the night, victims wasted away, their skin yellowing, their eyes ringed with shadow, until one night, driven mad with torment, they would seize a mirror and with their own hands claw their features to ribbons. The palace whispered of women found shrieking in their chambers, their faces unrecognizable, torn open with bloody nails, pools of crimson soaking the silk beneath them, until the body finally lay still and the silence returned to the women of the palace. Goo was a terror that reached beyond the flesh. It was also the proof that in those jeweled halls, the cruelties of human envy could be more monstrous than any beast. The court erased such stories, but the fear lingered, and behind every act was the same fire: jealousy, ambition, desperate survival. If you are favored, you steal another's hope. If you are rewarded, you take another's share. Even if you seek no quarrel, your very existence may block someone else's path. And so, you begin searching for allies. But you have seen it with your own eyes, the sister who yesterday laughed with you at the blossoms will tomorrow, for a bolt of brocade, twist your words and whisper them to the Empress herself. In this place, alliances are paper thin, a smile is a mask, and behind it wait the fangs. You must open your eyes wide, listen carefully, notice whose nails dig into their palms when you are praised. Notice whose voice trembles with envy when they greet you. Notice who asks too often about your cycle, your food, your sleep. For here, survival rests on vigilance. One mistake, and you join the list of those who died of sudden illness or hung themselves in shame. Not every day brings blood. More often, it is whispers, stares, small cruelties, but the constant fear that the next bowl of tea hides poison, that your beauty may vanish overnight, that you may be smothered in your sleep. That fear is sharper than any sword. This was the daily torment of the palace, not seen in the chronicles, but carved forever into the hearts of those who lived it. In this sea of blossoms, this glittering cage of jade and silk, a face alone is nothing. Beauty without root is but floating duckweed, easily scattered by the first wind or rain. The chin and the zither, chess and calligraphy, poetry, dance, and song. These arts are not mere ornaments to pass the lonely hours. They are weapons, sharper than any blade, and they are your only ladder to climb. You soon learn. Here, every skill is a step upward. You begin to probe discreetly what delights the Son of Heaven most. Does he favor the melancholy strains of Moon Over the Spring River? Does he admire the brushwork of Wu Daozi? Does he hunger for the intricate battles of the Wei Qi board? once the secret is known, a fashion stirs through the palace. If he favors music, especially the thundering drums of Kucha, suddenly the air of every courtyard trembles with practice beats, even if fingers blister, even if wrists ache swollen. No one dares relent, not for love of art, but for survival, for the silent game of pleasing the sovereign. And so you spend countless nights in pain and labor, your fingertips torn by strings, your throat raw from endless song, every sacrifice for the faint hope that one day, perhaps once in your life, you may be summoned to astound. The chance, when it comes, is fleeting. Perhaps at a banquet, when the emperor and empress are light with wine, you are called forth to dance. Perhaps on a stroll through the gardens, the emperor pauses by a pavilion and hears your sorrowful notes upon the kin. Perhaps at a midnight feast, he demands a folk tune, and the southern song you have labored to master slips perfectly into his heart. Whatever the moment, you must summon all that you are, every nerve, every drop of spirit, for in his gaze, curious, playful, cold, your fate balances on the edge of a breath. Some emperors seek more than beauty. They long for a companion of wit, a woman who can match them in verse, who can challenge them in chess, who can speak even upon the matters of state. Such a bond, a true meeting of minds, is rare as phoenix feathers, but when it exists, it lasts longer than desire. It binds stronger than flesh. History remembers them, consort Xu Hui of Tung Taizong, so learned, so eloquent, that she advised even on affairs of empire. For this, she was cherished as no empty beauty could ever be. And should you shine in such a way, perhaps you will be charged to instruct the young princes and princesses, teaching them calligraphy, painting, music. It is honor, yes, but also strategy, for it places you near the heirs of tomorrow, gives you a quiet, unthreatening path to power. Yet talent is poison as much as gift. The brighter you burn, the deeper the shadows you cast, and shadows breed envy. You never know whether on the eve of your great performance, your beloved chin strings have already been slashed half through, whether the honeyed water offered by a smiling sister has been laced with powder to steal your voice, or whether whispers spread behind your back that your poem that so impressed the court was stolen, plagiarized, unworthy of praise. History's scrolls are crowded with one remembered for their art, Ban Jieyu of Han, mournful in her ode to the fan, Shangguan Wan'er of Tung, a poet, a secretary, a power in her own right. Talent made them more than playthings. It gave them roots where beauty alone would drift away. And in the palace, Some seek even stranger arts. One learns to mimic the cries of birds, hoping to startle joy into the emperor's heart during a stroll. Another becomes a doctor of flowers, knowing every herb and blossom to catch his attention in talk. They gamble all on the one chance that novelty may awaken him from his weariness of endless beauty. And yet, all this exists beneath a shadow of fear. Some songs are cursed, forbidden, said to summon grief and misfortune. Some verses are taboo, and to recite them invites suspicion. Superstition wraps the palace like an unseen chain. Every note, every word must tread on ice. Later scholars would debate, did emperors truly delight in these arts, or was it only spectacle, a theater of living ornaments to display their culture, their taste, their grandeur? Perhaps the truth is cruel, that the women's talents were not treasures, but adornments, not gifts, but instruments. Their music, their poems, their painted dreams, all became part of the emperor's splendor. But their own hearts, their tears, their struggles, were noticed least of all. The emperor's favor flows eastward like water. To be loved brings worry. To be forgotten brings sorrow. These lines of poetry are no exaggeration of idle scholars. The favor of a sovereign is like clouds drifting in an autumn sky, gathering, scattering, never by human will. You may find that just a faint wrinkle at the corner of your eye is enough for his gaze never to rest on you again, or one careless word striking his ear wrong may hurl you from heaven straight into the abyss, or perhaps no fault at all, only that a fresher, softer beauty has entered the palace, and with her easy flattery, she sweeps away all you once struggled to build, the signs of decline, at first as thin as spider silk, yet sharp enough to chill your heart. First, the eunuchs, once they came daily, bearing gifts, smiles heaped on their faces. Now they trickle in, and when they come, their laughter is forced, their eyes impatient. Then the subtle changes in your allotments. Meals arrive lukewarm or cold winter charcoal, smokes thick, choking tears into your eyes, but no one bothers to replace it. Rouge and powder, once bright as petals, arrive in dull, muddy hues, unfit for use. Even those who serve you shift their tone. Their steps grow heavy, their answers slow, and behind your back you catch the hushed laughter, the whispers. The awe in their gaze is gone. In its place, pity and worse, contempt, but the deadliest sign is the summons to move, a sudden decree, and you are invited to leave your fine apartments and sent instead to a remote courtyard where the sun rarely reaches. This is no mere relocation. It is an edict carved in silence, declaring to all you are finished. There lies a place all fear, whispered only in trembling voices as the cold palace. From your very first day within the harem, the elder women lean close, their words barely louder than a breath. Favor's shadow is colder than death. You will hear stories of Empress Chen, Lady Ajiao, the glittering bride of Emperor Wu of Han Dynasty, born to gold, raised to glory, but accused of witchcraft, the most loathed of crimes. She was cast down, banished to Shangmen Palace, a known cold palace of the Han Dynasty. She paid a fortune to the great poet Sima Xiangru, commissioning the immortal rhapsody of the Long Gate, hoping its verses might soften the emperor's heart. But no poem could reach him. No ink could untangle suspicion once it had taken root. She withered in silence, died in loneliness, never again allowed to see the man she once called husband. You will hear of her successor, Empress Wei Zifu. For half a lifetime, she basked in unrivaled honor. Her son, the crown prince, her family powerful, her name resounding in every hall. But when the witchcraft crisis erupted, the court turned red with blood. Her son, forced to rebellion and desperation, failed and perished. Her seal was seized, her title stripped. She, the once mighty empress, left with nothing, denied even the chance to plead her innocence. She tied a length of white silk about her throat and ended her life. Her body was placed in a thin coffin, cast outside the walls of Shangan without a tomb or dignity, and the palace where she breathed her last, forever remembered as another cold palace of the Han. You will shudder at the tale of Empress Wang and consort Xiao, destroyed by the rise of the only female emperor in Chinese history, Wu Zetian, stripped of title, reduced to commoners, entombed in airless chambers without light. Their food passed through a hole in the wall, like beasts. Once, Emperor Gaozong, soft-hearted, inquired after them. But Wu Zetian, seeing his pity, exploded with fury. Her orders were merciless. The two women were dragged out, beaten with 100 strokes, their hands and feet severed, their mangled bodies stuffed into wine jars. She sneered, "Let their bones be drunk." They lingered for days in unspeakable torment, wailing in blood and darkness, until death finally claimed them. Even then, their heads were struck from their corpses. That chamber, a place of screams and broken flesh, became one of history's bloodiest cold palaces of the Tang Dynasty. And even in later dynasties, the horror endured. In the Ming, Lady Wang Gongfei, a palace servant of lowly birth, bore the emperor's eldest son, the very child who would grow to inherit the throne. Yet her humble origins were deemed a disgrace to imperial dignity. Instead of honors, she was locked away in Jingyang Palace the moment she gave birth. She never once saw her son again. Day after day, she wept until her eyes turned blind, her voice hoarse from calling a name that never came. At last, she died in grief, entombed in isolation. The Jingyang Palace, too, was spoken of no more, except in whispers of fear. The Cold Palace is not one hall, not one name. It is not carved into stone, nor marked upon the map. It is every forgotten corner, every silent, shadowed chamber, every sealed gate that swallows the unwanted and the inconvenient. It is where the fallen are sent to vanish once inside. Time ceases day after day. You lean on a frozen door frame, watching a square of sky shrink from dawn to dusk. Former companions avoid you, skirting past as if you carried plague. You become a ghost of the harem, still breathing, but erased. To endure, some turn to Buddha. They whisper sutras, hoping incense smoke may carry their souls beyond. Others cling to small tasks, tending a patch of vegetables, as if those fragile shoots were hope itself, or embroidering endlessly, stitching sorrow into patterns no one will ever see. But most wither illness, silence, death, and a few, desperate, feign collapse or throw themselves into the emperor's path, hoping pity might revive their fate. But pity is rare and punishment swift. Most vanish faster for the attempt. Whispers say the cold palaces are haunted, that the air is thick with grievance, that at night soft weeping seeps from the windows, the scratch of nails upon wood, that pale shadows in ancient robes drift by dry wells, so no one dares near them after dark. You may glimpse a woman once famed for beauty, now bent, shabby, hauling murky water to pour over her wild patch of weeds. Her jade hands, once kissed by emperors, now cracked with dirt and callous. This is her last bond to the living world. Scholars debate still. Was the cold palace a fixed law, or simply the natural end for the forgotten? No one knows how many lives rotted out behind those sealed walls. Were they suicides, lingering sickness, madness? The truth is buried with their bodies in silence beneath the palace stones, forever unseen in this resplendent cage of women, sealed away from the outside world. There exists a presence both constant and uncanny. The eunuchs, they are like countless threads of shadow, weaving a vast invisible net, controlling the opening and closing of palace gates, the flow of whispers, the distribution of every morsel and garment, and more than this, those closest to the emperor, the eunuchs at his very side. Their words, light as feathers, can subtly tilt the sovereign's moods, even his decisions. For you, learning how to move among them is no choice, but survival itself. They may be the hands that lift you into radiance, or the ones that shove you into the abyss. Their twisted power lies rooted in their tragic state of neither man nor woman. The cruel blade that unmade them stripped away their essence as men, and, in theory, erased any threat to imperial power. Thus, they were trusted to wander the forbidden chambers, allowed to serve the women no other man might touch. In this kingdom of daughters, they are the only men you may ever meet besides the emperor, and that proximity is power in itself. Their authority wears many forms. At court, the Grand Chamberlains guard the throat of all communication. A single word, whispered in passing, may remake your image in the emperor's eyes. A memorial from your family, placed too low in their stack of scrolls, may never be seen again. They command the food, the clothing, the servants. The invisible scales rest in their hands. If they favor you, your winter charcoal burns clean and long. Your meals arrive hot and fragrant. If they despise you, you are left with damp, smoking coal, with cold scraps and bitter broth. They are also the eyes and ears of the palace, a net of intelligence tighter than any spy could weave. They know who wept last night, who received a letter from home, who lingered too long speaking with another in the garden. These fragments, when needed, become daggers, and yet, among themselves, they too scheme and devour. Their rivalries are no less vicious than those of the concubines. To keep favor with the right chamberlain is an art every woman must learn, a respectful word, a gift at the new year, a helping hand when they feign distress. Any of these may one day return as salvation. A well-placed eunuch may one night remark, almost idly, such and such talented lady has lately devoted herself to calligraphy. Her quiet grace is most admirable. One sentence worth more than months of labor, or in darker times. He may send you a warning, barely whispered, just enough to prepare your defense before disaster strikes. But if you offend even the lowest among them, your days may rot. A stable boy with a broom may scatter moss upon your path, so you slip disgraced, or mix rotten greens into your ration of food, or worse, seed the palace with whispered lies about your name. You may move carefully, watchfully, and still send walls rising around you unseen. Behind them stands a eunuch, smiling. Of course, greed and arrogance flourish among them. Many extort bribes, crush rivals, grow fat on power. In the later Tang Dynasty, Gao Lishi, the beloved head eunuch of Emperor Xuanzong, rose so high the whole court bowed before him. In Ming times, Wei Chongxian, also a head eunuch of the emperor, styled himself Lord of 9,000 years. He meddled in court affairs, deposed empresses, dragging the scourge of eunuchs to its darkest extreme. In the shadows of these walls, there exists another bond, twisted, desperate, yet human. It is called paired eating, or vegetable households, eunuchs and palace maids, even forgotten concubines without hope, sometimes form secret unions, not true marriages, but fragile companionships, to warm the cold of endless years. Everyone knows, few speak, but once revealed, it becomes scandal, a weapon for enemies. To deal with eunuchs is a delicate, perilous art. Even gifts must be cloaked in grace, timed to perfection, never too eager, never too crude. Respect must shine, but not desperation, for flattery that stumbles strikes like a hoof, and then you are crushed. Historians speak with conflicted tongues. Were eunuchs the greatest victims of the imperial machine, mutilated in body and spirit, yet still its fiercest servants and parasites? Some climbed to peaks of power, their desires bloated beyond measure, but most remained voiceless slaves, trampled shadows in these endless halls, living small, dying smaller, and leaving nothing behind but silence. Within this miniature kingdom of strict hierarchies, your food, your clothing, your dwelling, your every gesture is a naked proclamation of your rank. Every detail is watched, weighed, judged, and at times turned into the very knife that cuts you down. Clothing is your first name card in the palace. What fabric you may wear, what color, what patterns, is bound by iron rules, never to be crossed. The shimmering silks of Yue, thin as mist, glowing like clouds, the translucent gauze of the shark weavers. Such luxuries can never belong to you, a lowly, talented lady. And as for the radiant yellow, the solemn crimson, those are colors of the emperor alone. To touch even a thread is high treason, even among the reds and blues permitted to favored concubines. The shades themselves carry weight, too bright, too vivid for your rank, and you might be branded as dangerous, accused of harboring ambitions beyond your station. Patterns, too, are mines waiting to explode. Dragons and phoenixes belong only to emperor and empress. Peacocks, pheasants, peonies. These are reserved for noble consorts. For you, perhaps only a few curling vines at the hem of a sleeve. Even the pin in your hair, whether of jade, of gold, or of plain silver, must match your grade precisely. Records tell of a concubine, low-ranked, who once hid away a shawl, embroidered with golden cloud patterns, reserved only for ladies of higher station. She was discovered, charged with transgression of rank, flogged 50 times, and cast into the cold palace, never seen again. There is one exception: imperial reward. If the Son of Heaven places in your hands a bolt of shoe brocade or a headpiece of crimson gold, then yes, you may wear it openly. But remember always, this is not yours. It is His grace, not your right. Jealous eyes will watch you, wait for you to stumble. Perhaps they will kindly urge you to wear it on the wrong occasion, or remark slyly upon your bearing. A petty girl in a crown too heavy. One phrase like that, and favor curdles into scorn. Food is another extension of power. Every dish you taste, its number, its fineness, its very bowl, is dictated by your rank. Noble consorts feast upon the 8 treasures of the mountains, the 8 rarities of the seas, arranged like works of art. Yours, a few common meats and greens, served in plain porcelain. Dining together is a theater of politics. Who you may sit beside, whose dishes you may accept, each decision is a blade's edge. A cake offered by the Empress herself might be honor, or a sugar-coated trap. You never know if a sweet has been laced with something mild, enough to bring a faint sickness, enough to ruin your song on the very night of your performance. The rules of diet are countless. During mourning, only plain vegetables. On certain holy days, no meat may pass your lips. According to the court physicians, certain foods are deemed too fiery or too cold, forbidden at certain times. And then there are the taboos of omen and wordplay. Pears, li, sound like separation. Melons, gua, echo quarrels. Never served when harmony is needed, but pomegranates, heavy with seeds and carp, symbols of rank and wealth, are offered often as blessings in disguise. Makeup and bearing are cages of their own. Tongue women are famed for lavish beauty, but what powders you may use, what shape your brows may take, what jewel may mark your forehead, all are bound to your favor and your station. The finest rouge and indigo, imported, precious, belong to the highest favorites. You scrape what remains, even the tilt of your brows, the curve of your smile, the sway of your skirt, the depth at which your eyes must fall, are watched by stern old matrons, hawk-eyed, merciless. The smallest slip is magnified. If, while greeting the noble consort, your hands tremble, your teacup clinks, you may be punished for disrespect. There is no mercy. They say of one beauty in ages past, her hair was piled in a towering new style, bright with jewels. One night, she happened to stand near a lady of higher grade, and her ornaments shone brighter. The emperor was told she was frivolous, corrupting the orator. That night, she vanished from sight, Even hairstyles are signals. The soaring phoenix, the astounding cloud. They take hours, wax, pins, jewels. They are crowns of status. To imitate them in a lower rank is to sign your own doom. And then there are the silent laws. If a noble consort wears peonies today, no other dares. You must choose plum or orchid, or risk being accused of rivalry. Scholars argue over how strictly these rules were enforced. But in the magnifying glass of the harem, every detail is sharpened into a weapon. These codes were never truly about order. They were invisible prisons, chains binding each woman to her place and punishing the slightest reach beyond. In this deep palace, where rank is measured by offspring, childbearing, especially the birth of a prince, is not a simple continuation of bloodlines, but a life and death wager, staked with your future and your family's honor. Mother ennobled by her son, behind those four characters lie the blood and tears and the bleached bones of countless women. From the moment you receive imperial favor, an unseen pressure clings to you like a shadow. The Son of Heaven needs princes to steady the realm. Your clan longs to trade a royal heir for power, and you know best of all that only by bearing a son can you carve out a corner of safety in this place that devours people and avoid becoming a cast-off relic, a pearl gone dull. Yet pregnancy is only the beginning of this cruel war. Once the glad news spreads, you become the target of every arrow. An open spear is easy to dodge. A hidden dart is not. You will hear of the horrors in the Han Palace of old. Emperor Wu's Empress Zhao Feiyan and her sister Zhao Heda, unable to bear children, crushed other pregnant women with merciless means. The chronicles say that a maid named Cao, who bore the emperor a son, had her infant seized by Zhao Heda's agents and killed. Soon after, Cao herself was driven to suicide. Another consort, Lady Shu, also lost her son. Coerced and finally executed by imperial order to quiet the dispute within the harem, so vicious were those methods that even the court historians wrote with horror. In our own dynasty, similar tales circulate in whispers. You will hear of a talented lady who finally conceived the dragon seed, yet after a flower viewing banquet, she miscarried without cause, blood pouring beneath her. The imperial physicians later found that the red date longan tonic she drank daily had been heavily dosed with safflower, a drug that moves the blood. Or another palace lady, sound through all her months, who on the very eve of labor doubled over with pain and delivered a child blue and still. The midwife suspected a rare cold poison, but no one dared inquire. The case was written off as weakness in the womb. Then there are the dreadful rumors of sorcery and curse. They say a favored consort will bribe a warlock skilled in averting victory to fashion a little wooden figure inscribed with the enemy's name and birth tokens, pinning needles into heart or belly and burying it beneath her courtyard trees so that the fetus withers and dies within. True or false, such tales are enough to rob every pregnant woman of food and sleep. Thus you live in constant fear of poison, of curse. You dare not drink soups sent by other hands, dare not use sachets of unknown origin. Even those who serve at your side are met with doubt. There are customs to wear a jade charm for safeguarding the womb, to hang a bronze mirror at the door to ward evil, but before deliberate malice, such protections feel thin as paper. Even if you endure 10 months of carrying, the birth itself is a gate to the underworld. In that age, childbed fever, hemorrhage, difficult labor could claim your life at any instant. You lie upon the birthing couch, sweat and blood soaking the quilts, your voice torn by screaming, and must entrust your fate to the midwife's experience and the frail mercy of heaven at the first cry. Whether the child is boy or girl, your road is chosen. If it is a prince, especially when heirs are few, you rise in a single step, rewards and promotions pouring in, your family basking in reflected glory. If it is a princess, rewards still come, yet the taste of disappointment and the sly delight in others' eyes is plain to see. But this is far from the end. The child's growing up is another path, longer, rougher, deadlier. Infant death hangs over the harem like a dark canopy, a common chill, a light looseness of the bowels can snatch a fragile life. More terrible than sickness is the human heart. You will hear the most chilling cases. A beauty, after trials unnumbered, gives birth to a prince, only for the wet nurse to find him one morning, face blue, smothered in his swaddling. Questions abound, evidence there is none, and the blame is laid as negligent nursing. Closed with a few strokes of the brush, there are princes who, just as they begin to babble their first words, are fed a sweet laced with poisoned honey. Their small bodies convulse in agony for an entire day, until at last they die in their mother's arms. Imagine the torment of an imperial woman who has spent her whole life under rules, surveillance, and longing, forced to watch with cutting clarity as that fragile body grows cold and stiff. The memory will carve itself into her soul. It will haunt her nights forever, a grief that even in dreams will never release her. In this savage struggle for heirs, even the wet nurse closest to a prince may become the target of plots. You will hear an old secret venomous tale, enough to chill the spine. They say that in the late reign of the previous emperor, a consort Lady Liu, by astounding fortune, she bore a healthy prince and blazed in favor. The emperor himself chose a strong, milk-rich nurse named Madame Zhang. Plain and kind, she tended the child with perfect care. Lady Liu relied on her utterly, but envy had already sprouted in the dark. A high-ranked consort, long at odds with Lady Liu and childless herself, reached not for the prince, but for the defenseless nurse. Poisoning the air outright would be too bold, too easily traced. She chose a subtler, crueler path. By heavy bribe and threats upon family, she bought the little eunuch who prepared the nurse's milk-stirring tonics. For months on end, a slow, cold poison was secretly blended into the nurse's daily draft. It did not strike at once, but flowed through her milk day after day into the prince. At first, the child only cried more than before, ate a little less. The physicians took the pulse, declared a slight disharmony of spleen and stomach, and wrote gentle prescriptions. Gradually, the fear began. The prince's pink cheeks lost their color, turned waxen. His bright black eyes grew turbid and dull. He no longer babbled, but in the depth of night let out a small beast's whimpering cry that pierced the heart. Lady Liu burned with panic, summoning almost all imperial physicians. None could find the cause. Some said it was a weakness brought from the womb. Others hinted at colliding with unclean spirits. Then one day soon after, Nurse Zhang herself began shedding hair in handfuls, her gums bleeding often, her face ashen like gilt paper. Only then did someone suspect the nurse, but all was too late. When the physicians at last doubted the diet and found the source, the little prince's organs were already ruined. On a bitter winter night, a child who had never yet clearly called mother ended after days of convulsions and moaning, and breathed his last in Lady Liu's despairing arms. His small body curled in upon itself, his pupils blown wide at the end, as if he had seen something unspeakable. As for Nurse Zhang, she lived, but shattered, her body wrecked by poison. Not long after, she died quietly in a narrow room along the servants' lane. The affair was officially written as the wet nurse's accidental intake of unclean substance implicating the prince. Another court tragedy with no one to answer, no one daring to dig. The true hand behind it all merely sighed a few times in her own palace and stood spotless. This plot's malice lay in its perfect use of palace rules, that princes depend on wet nurses. It sidestepped the direct checks upon a royal child's food, worked slowly and indirectly, and even if exposed, could be shrugged off as accident, leaving no clear trail to the true culprit. So sly, so pitiless, that every mother shudders when handing her child to a nurse, even if a child lives to grow, disaster may still strike. There was a prince who, chasing butterflies in the imperial garden, happened to fall into a deep pool, and the attending eunuch was not nearby. Another, learning to ride and shoot, was thrown by a suddenly mad imperial horse, trampled and crippled, forever stripped of his claim. From now on, your fate is lashed to your child's. If he thrives, you are unshakable. If he dies or is maimed, you lose all value and wither swiftly in grief and in loss of favor. Consorts, crazed for sons, will spin fortunes on strange prescriptions, swallow violent turn girl to boy decoctions, and ruin their own bodies. High-ranked ladies without children may seize the offspring of lower consorts to raise as their own. The birth mother left took a watch in endless longing and pain, as her flesh and blood calls another mother. In such extremity, mother love and the hunger to survive twist together. How much of your care is bone-deep instinct, and how much is investment in your own tomorrow? When your child is ringed by wet nurse, eunuchs, tutors, when even to see him you must move through rules and petitions, that feeling grows ever more tangled, ever more bleak. In this deep palace, every infant's cry may come with a mother's wildest joy and her deepest fear. In this palace that imprisons countless fair women, illness stands alongside loss of favor and hidden plots as one of the most ordinary terrors. No matter how dazzling you once were, a small chill may cast you down into an abyss with no return. Though the palace houses the Imperial Medical Bureau, gathering what are called the finest doctors of the realm, whether you live or die rests directly on your rank and the warmth or coldness of imperial favor. If you are deeply in favor, the head of the bureau himself may lead the best physicians to your side. Precious medicines flow in like running water. They keep sleepless watch through the night, arguing over every detail of your condition, striving to leave not the smallest chance of failure. But if you are a neglected, low-ranked consort, the scene is utterly different. Your maids may beg with tears, only to bring a trembling novice physician who stands outside heavy curtains, murmurs a few hasty questions, and prescribes the most ordinary, mild to ineffective remedies, his sole aim being to avoid error. The herbs you require will be shorted by eunuchs, replaced with cheap substitutes, or cut in half. Your recovery is left to fate. Within the bureau, rank is as strict as in the harem itself. The most skilled old doctors treat only the emperor, the empress, and a few favored consorts. What you will see are mostly young officials, still gathering experience, and a single misjudgment of theirs may claim your life. The palace breeds countless and deadly sicknesses. The high cold halls make coughs and phthisis common. The endless worry and unbalanced diet bring stomach pain and choking illnesses, some akin to cancers. And when epidemics like smallpox or plague arise, they sweep through the courts with horror speed. As for women's secret ailments, discharges, bleeding, they are too shameful to speak aloud and often dragged on until no medicine can save. Worst of all is being marked as a contagion disease of any sort. If such a verdict falls, in the blink of an eye, eunuchs will seize you, wrap you roughly in cloth, drag you to the most abandoned corner of the palace, and leave you in isolation. It is nothing less than a gentle death sentence. You will be stripped of all care. Your meals left outside the door, cold as stone. You will lie in despair, listening to stray cats wail above the eaves, while life seeps away from your frozen body until you, too, like the rumored fierce ghosts, rot silently within this splendid tomb. Tongue medicine had its triumphs, yet before many illnesses it stood powerless. Worse still, superstition and sorcery mixed deeply into its practice. A physician might hand you elixirs of long life or detox pills laden with mercuric cinnabar and poisonous lead. If your fever will not break, they may bleed you, believing that by letting your blood flow out, the illness itself would flow away with it, but actually leaving your frail body even weaker. If no cure is found, they may call it possession by spirits and summon Taoist priests to beat drums and drive demons, adding spiritual torment atop physical agony for a consort already fallen from favor. Illness is often the end. Your servants, fearing contagion or seeing no hope, scatter like leaves. They neglect your care. Some even steal what small treasures you still possess. The physicians stop returning. At last, you die silently in pain, in solitude, in terror, upon a cold bed. No one notices until your body begins to stink. Then a rough mat is rolled, your corpse lifted out of the palace in haste, as if you had never lived at all. Palace medicine held many bizarre practices. People believed sudden sickness came from curses or vengeful ghosts. Thus, remedies were paired with charms of Taoist priests or prayers of monks. A single treatment might fill the air with both herbs and incense. Most absurd of all was pulse by hanging thread. To preserve the chastity of noble women, some would sit behind layers of brocade curtains, a thread tied to their wrist, extended outside for the physician to feel and guess the faint movements of their pulse. Such self-deception, such folly, was nothing less than gambling life itself. Histories record countless brilliant formulas and legendary doctors, but the true results lie lost in time. The palace's medicine was less a refuge of science than a stage of privilege. What it held was not skill beyond the common folk, but finer service for the mighty and elaborate rituals that soothed more than they healed. Here, survival and death were never merely matters of medicine, but the barest, cruelest play of power. If the emperor leaves no clear heir before his death, or if the princes stand evenly matched in power, then a storm of blood and fire sweeps across the empire without warning. In that moment, the harem is no gentle land of tenderness. It becomes the cruelest second battlefield of power. Every consort who bears a son and every clan standing behind her is forced to wager all upon the table, locked in a gamble of life and death. You and your son can no longer stand aside. You are drawn into the flood, your fate bound to heaven's decree. History shows such tragedies again and again. In distant times, the witchcraft calamity of Emperor Wu of Han, the crown prince Liu Ju, together with his mother, Empress Wei Zifu, fell victim to the accusations of witchcraft against the old emperor. One hanged herself, one was deposed and killed. Tens of thousands of their clan and supporters were implicated. It marked one of the bloodiest and most unexpected tragedies of father and son vying for the throne in the history of the Han Dynasty. Then came Chang'an, the great capital of the Tang, where you now dwell, a city whose splendor has always been shadowed by rivers of blood. Every soul of the dynasty knows the tale, whispered with dread, the bloody dawn of the Tang Empire's reign, the coup at Xuanwu Gate. Though the clash of steel raged outside the palace walls, within its echoes shook every chamber. Brothers cut down brothers, nephews struck lifeless before the eyes of their uncles. Kin slaughtered kin until the paving stones ran red, and to every woman locked within the depths of the harem, it revealed a single truth. In the struggle for the throne, there is no family, no love, no kinship. The mother of the vanquished has but one fate, death. For when the new emperor seizes the dragon throne, the heavens themselves tilt, and the whole world shifts in a single breath. The new sovereign brings with him his beloved consorts, his confidants, his allies, who fill both court and harem, and you, the women of the late emperor, unless you are his mother, and thus revered as Empress Dowager, or unless you played a hand in raising him to power, you are seen as remnants of the old reign, obstacles to be swept aside. What awaits you is not honor and care. A high-ranking consort may be treated with respect, removed to a distant, silent retreat, a place that is but a prison veiled with courtesy, where she ends her days in solitude. Far more common are the childless women, banished in groups to imperial nunneries or Taoist cloisters, their hair shorn, their names erased. condemned to chant before lamps and idols, to pray for the empire's peace, when in truth their own selves are being erased from the map of power. And this, people say, is already mercy. Worse fates still lurk. There are times when women are ordered to die with the late emperor. This practice, not always in use, but when revived, it falls like nightmare upon every consort. They are given the silken cord or forced to drink poison under the beautiful pretense of serving their lord in the afterlife. Yet in truth, it is only the coldest of measures to remove threats and proclaim the new dynasty's iron power. If calamity strikes the empire, as when the Anlushan rebellion tore across the land, then the fate of the whole imperial clan drifts like duckweed. Rebels storm into Chang'an, and the end of the women within is unspeakable. Some are slaughtered, some violated, some taken as trophies to please new masters. Others, fleeing in chaos, lose their escort, fall to hunger, cold, despair, their fates forever unknown. Yesterday's splendor becomes today's hell. Rumor whispers of hidden tunnels beneath certain palaces, but when chaos truly comes, will they open onto escape, or only hasten you into death's embrace? None can say. Historians often sigh that in such palace upheavals, women's agency is almost nothing. Some few, by wisdom and calm, find ways to survive, secretly offering allegiance to the winning side, or hiding among the common folk when the city falls. But for most, their fate is sealed in the moment their faction fails. They are burdens, they are marks of the past, they are things to be erased. Never are they masters of their own life and death. When you look back on such a life, after bearing witness to countless rise and fall, you feel lost, lost within your own existence, lost in the knowledge that the vast majority of women imprisoned within these palace walls would vanish without record, without name, without voice, silenced, erased, as though they had never lived at all. In the bloom of their youth, chosen to enter the harem, yet never truly loved, like beautiful vessels, displayed for a moment, then set aside to gather dust as the seasons turned, and in the end, their bodies laid in nameless graves, as light as dust. Somewhere deep within, you still dream to one day leave these gates alive, to taste freedom again. Perhaps in some rare moment of mercy, when a new emperor ascends the throne, drunk on celebration, and grants pardon to the forgotten. Yet you cannot help but wonder what truly waits beyond the gates. You have been cut off from the world for too long. Your identity, blurred, awkward, unwelcome. You have heard the stories of those who returned home only to find no home left, parents gone, families estranged, kin ashamed to acknowledge an abandoned imperial woman who carried no wealth, no rank, no beauty, no use. They ended their days in poverty and loneliness. You gaze upon these towering red walls and you ask yourself, was all this struggle worth it? All the schemes, the compromises, the sins carried upon trembling hands. What remains in the end? Perhaps nothing more than a grand phrase, 3,000 beauties of the harem for scholars to admire as a curiosity of history. And yet, even when despair nearly drowns you, you remember the darker shadows still, shadows that reach beyond you to your family, the dreaded Yetting Bureau that swallowed not only fallen women, but their brothers, their fathers, their children. A woman's downfall could shatter her entire clan, fathers sent to exile, siblings cast into shame, children marked as slaves for life. From the moment you entered these gates, you bore more than your own destiny. You carried the weight of your whole bloodline. So, even if you feel lost, so lost, you endure. For in this world, your fate is never yours to write. Through red walls and yellow tiles, through splendid halls that were nothing but a gilded hell, you have touched the stolen youth, the endless sorrows you're locked within. It feels as though you have walked across centuries, though you are still in your early 20s. The brilliance of the palace is both its glamour of power and its chains of despair. And you, like countless souls before you, dissolve quietly into history's river, never to be recovered. So it is, dust in a silvery river. So it is. You were here, you lived, you wept, you endured, and then you will go. You will forget, for this is life, and when the river of time stretches long enough, even the remembered will be forgotten. So you let go. You let all these grasping feelings drift through you, like cloud, like mist, no longer sharp, no longer loud, no longer hurt. Dream to dream, dust to dust. Above the palace roofs, the moon hangs eternal, watching silently as it has for 1,000 years. And beneath it, the river of time flows on, carrying all voices, all names, all sorrows, until even memory becomes mist.